Shanti, good evening. Welcome to Interview with the Raj Yogi. Our topic this session is spiritual awareness and perception. As usual, we'll start with a reflection. Out of the physical senses, I can see how powerful the physical eyes are. What I see can very much shape my thoughts and therefore my feelings and even my attitudes, choices, decisions. Even as I sit here now, there might be a strong pull to close the physical eyes so that I can feel more mastery over the mind, as if things operate from the outside in. I experiment, keeping the eyes open, the physical eyes open, to see if it can work the other way, from the inside out. And I begin to wonder, maybe that's the way it's always been working. That my inner state determines how powerful the physical eyes are in shaping my experience. If I was to come into a very peaceful, calm state, completely just in this moment, giving myself permission to not think of anything from the day and not plan or worry about anything of tomorrow. Completely in this moment, the sense of being an observer, a neutral observer, very calm, at ease, this inner state. Does it change the power of the physical eyes in shaping my experience? This is my experiment. Does it work from the outside in or the inside out, how I see? Om Shanti.
Om Shanti, and welcome to those who joined us for Interview with the Raj Yogi, Part 2, Spiritual Awareness and Perception. So welcome to those on Instagram as well as those on YouTube. So we have Julie returning with us for Part 2, And so hopefully it won't be like a flowy, but we had a wonderful opportunity to have Tanya with us last week, student of Raj Yoga, joining us from Montreal. For those on Instagram, we're not sure if we were successful at posting part 1, so you're welcome to visit the BK Calgary YouTube website and check out the playlist for Raj Yoga interview and last week's session on this aspect of awareness and perception. I really enjoy the commentary because I was thinking a lot about, and we talked about this, we touched on this last week, about this aspect of perception is about being able to see. And one of the really important aspects of Raj Yoga is being a detached observer. So how does that play in? Because usually when we think of perception, we talk about how we see things, but this aspect of detached observer is very unique in this study.
We might need a few sessions just on that, because it's a very interesting topic. I remember an experience when I was in dance school. And in dance school, you really have to develop, and this is a physical example, so please take it in that way, but you really have to develop the capacity in terms of physical alignment to self-correct. We're given lots of education, information, of course, but in terms of applying it, we really are taught, trained from quite young, to learn how to self-correct. So I remember one case where we were doing what's called center work, and there's often too many in the class for us to all be together, so we were divided into groups, and while one group is demonstrating the exercise for the ballet master, the rest of us, the other groups, 1 or 2, are in the back waiting for their turn, and we don't ever waste our time, so we're using that to practice. And we'd often turn to the mirrors in the back of the room because, again, we're trying to self-correct. That's what the mirrors are for. And I remember standing there, it was a very interesting experience, standing there looking at the self. Oh, Binny, thank you. Please let us know if it's any better.
Binny, does it matter which of the mics seems to be scattered? We have been having issues lately.
Yeah.
Assuming, Binny, you can actually hear what we're sharing.
Oh,
interesting.
Okay, we can share, no problem. So just quickly to finish, we're okay. Super. Thank you for the feedback. So I'm standing there, sort of practicing the physical movements, but I remember that feeling as if the body was in the mirror, and I was just standing there watching it. It was a very odd experience. I wouldn't call it out of body, but it was such an amazingly powerful state. And I think in that moment, although I was not in the study at that time, there was this feeling of there's me, and then there's this vehicle of action, and I'm watching it with the intention to benefit, to progress. And to me, this is detached observer, to stand very much in the sense of self, which is a very honest place, and to watch the self from this sort of state. with the intention not to judge or to punish or to criticize, but really to self-correct, to self-benefit, to uplift. So it's this really powerful state, but it requires I have a very strong sense of self. I'm able to stand in this very neutral space, which we call soul consciousness, and hopefully have more, we use the word objectivity, but clarity with which to look at the self. So ideally, detached observer is giving me that space of clarity.
I'm just going to check again to see if this works. Benny, thank you for your feedback. So let us know if this still doesn't sound very good. We'll just end up using Sister Judy's microphone. That's good. Thank you. So it's interesting because we don't usually think about perception in terms of having a very objective view of ourselves. I think sometimes we have these so-called filtered lenses. Just when you're sharing to be able to have a good sense of myself, is that then the relationship between, for those who may not know much about the details of what Raja Yoga is about, but the knowledge aspect in Raja Yoga, to be able to have a good sense of who I am?
So I'm going to start answering that, or looking at that question. So what did you do to correct the mic?
I unplugged everything and plugged them back in.
That's pretty...
A reset.
It was quite fun what was happening with this question, because this is exactly what happens to us, is our sight, our vision, our clarity, our discernment gets scattered, distorted. There's a lot of interference, and we just don't see it clearly, but we don't even know that that's going on. There's a lot of stuff mixed in there that's causing distortion. And for me, it's that we've actually become unplugged from the truth, or from this kind of bigger picture space. And the first thing I need to do is plug in. This is what Raj Yoga specializes in teaching us, is the awareness, the consciousness, the perspective, if you will. Interesting connection between perspective and perception. I need to plug into my alignment, if you will, before I even try to see. One of our seniors, Daddy Jenki, used to talk about, think before you think, or align before you use that capacity. I think that goes with any of our subtle capacities, is check your alignment, check your connection, check what you're anchored in before you engage in that capacity, whether it's thinking or speaking or seeing or acting or deciding, is I need to check the state. Is there distortion? Again, this would suggest I am a detached observer, I have that objectivity, but there's so much distortion that can come in and I'm not aware of it.
That's huge, to be able to just check in what's going on inside before I can actually see properly. I don't know if we actually are often aware that we miss that step.
I know that for me right now, I'm sort of exploring an issue where there's been lots of inputs from different souls, and it's very fascinating, because again, I think it's interesting to explore this connection between perspective and perception, and then this is what spiritual awareness is about, is changing my perspective or paradigm, so that my perception will change. But everyone is sharing their opinion, ideas from their perspective, and we can confuse perspective with fact, or I am right, and that already is something we have to be cautious about. But So I've got all of these inputs. Some are in complete conflict with each other. And I could go mad, as we say, it could eat my head up. Each one trying to shape how I see things. I can really feel that. It's nobody's fault, nobody's wrong. It's fascinating, actually. And so for me, what I'm doing is not really thinking about much of what anyone, but really taking time to just check my connection, check my perspective, my alignment, my awareness. Go deeply into that, we say, very neutral, peaceful, unlimited space. We almost, this idea of sitting kind of in God's eyes, if you will, in that kind of perspective, and not even exploring the issue until I've got that stage figured out.
Did you find for yourself an incredible level of letting go, a level of trust needed? Because we tend to sort of go at things directly, trying to fix things directly.
Yeah, we do like to think a lot. We like to, fix things in our old ways. And I think if we get to the point where we see, this isn't working, it certainly can build trust quickly. It's like, I need to look at other options. But yeah, I think there's a deep love and interest in exploring this spiritual awareness, this spiritual way of operating. And once we start to experiment, then we gain more and more confidence in that way of operating. And, it might, I think, even we really have to have a lot of conviction in it, because even if others are watching, they might question what you are doing, or in many cases not doing, because this spiritual approach is not really about jumping into action immediately, but spending a lot of time with the inner alignment. So it might be questioned at times, so there needs to be a real commitment that I really am interested in operating, exploring, operating this way.
Would you say then, because often we think of perception as we think of what we see outside of us, not necessarily when you were mentioning about a good sense of myself, my perception of myself then, we mentioned a little bit last week about when there's storms going on inside, or, I'm seeing things in others. I don't want to see their defects. I don't want to go into that. How does that perception, inner perception, how does that work?
Yeah, through all of this, I keep coming back to perspective, because I'm thinking a lot about the example I've given. Perhaps everyone can have a nap now. It's the same thing coming up. But, being in drawing class, and the idea is we would sit in a circle, and the model would be in the center of the room. And so it's fairly obvious that we all have a different perspective of that model. We're sitting in different places relative. Some of us are front, some of us behind. So that's fairly easy to see. So what each of us are going to see is going to be relative to our position in that circle. That was one aspect I noticed, but I also became very clear to me very quickly, because I'm off drawing this model, and I'm sort of horrified to see that it's turning almost a bit cartoonish, if you will, that there were things inside of me that were dictating what I was drawing to. And, being told in drawing class, so many I hear say I can't draw. And being told in drawing class very clearly, it's not a question of whether or not you draw as if there's some sort of magical quality in the hand. It's all about how you see. Completely determines what goes on that paper is how you see. So my seeing is really affected by the perspective I have and my inner position, if you will, and my inner biases. There's a lot of things that are coloring how I see. So I really need to kind of clarify all those different things that are happening, dynamics that are going on. What perspective, position am I sitting in? and what sort of filters and biases internally are really coloring. And spiritual study are great at helping me to understand and clarify those aspects.
Now, you had mentioned actually about the sense of neutrality. What does that mean? Because I know you talked about this objectivity, but it helps to have a sense of benefits and how I see myself, or for there to be benefits. And I know you used the example of looking in the mirror in ballet.
Mm-hmm. So one of the core principles, ideas, beliefs of the study of Raj Yoga is that every human soul is intrinsically good. And if we look honestly at this point in our journey through humanity, as you had mentioned, our vision on each other tends to be very critical, or sometimes we kind of worship one another. So neither of those are really accurate or, aligned with that core idea, core understanding. So when I look at another soul or myself, I am doing it with that understanding that we are all intrinsically good. What that allows me to do is not be deceived, if you will, or affected by any of these other things that might be going on the superficial level. I become unaffected. That's that sort of neutral state, is it doesn't in any way shape my thinking about that other soul or situation. So unaffected is neutral.
Thank you for clarifying, because I think sometimes mistaken neutral is that you're not feeling anything.
No, you're actually still very connected to that core understanding we are all intrinsically good.
It's just that there are no biases.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's equal for every soul, and there's a sense in every situation that it's beneficial, equal for every situation.
Now, I just want to backtrack a little bit. I know we only had one session of spirituality and attitude, but it left an impression on me. And because one of the last things we mentioned in that session was about the permanent shift that can happen in terms of our attitude because of going into the unlimited sense of who I am. And I was reflecting on, we're using an example of this individual who, it was based on a movie, but I really liked the example because, he had these certain ideas about individuals of a certain race. He was incarcerated. He landed up, his duty in jail was in the laundry room, and he ended up becoming really good friends with someone who was, of that racial background. And I was wondering if an experience like that can really change deep-set attitudes. And the reason I was wondering about that was, does it really, if you've had really bad experiences in the hospital and then you have one good experience, I don't know if maybe in your background you still remember those old bad experiences you had in the hospital. In terms of this detached observer, this aspect of perception again, do you find that helps? We're moving in the direction where we're letting go, we're transforming, we're letting go of all this stuff that's happening in the background, in our thoughts, our attitudes, our perceptions, opinions, and things like that. But this aspect of being a detached observer, so I can even watch the perceptions they have inside that come up from attitudes, come up from sanskars.
Yeah, again, it's that ground that I'm sort of standing in. So we use these two tools of knowledge and yoga it always feels like I'm creating a space I can stand in while this other stuff is going on. This very powerful space which has, it's sort of built out of spiritual wisdom and these very pure feelings, again, the intrinsic goodness of every soul. So these pure, I'm sort of creating a space. I love to sort of stand in that space because it just seems sensible and useful. And there can be all sorts, you're absolutely right, all sorts, many of which we're not even aware of, all sorts of other filters, biases, attitudes, etc., past impressions that are roaming around and trying to distort our vision. But we get better and better at standing in that space and seeing all those other currents and tensions. And we just, especially if we're really committed, to this idea of knowledge in yoga, those core understandings of Raj Yoga, and that idea of the importance of purity. If we're really committed to that, it really helps us to get more and more established in that safe space. Today a very interesting term was used, God's lap, but it's really kind of this refuge, this safe space that I can watch all of this craziness going on that really isn't me. So again, I have to be quite committed, really deeply have accepted we are intrinsically good. I'm going to stand in that. There's so many other things that could pull us off.
So perhaps maybe this is where the clarification is needed, because I feel personally this is a very different study, because I think inside we do try to force a lot of thinking not to happen or to happen. Feelings come up and you don't even know you're suppressing or you're feeling bad. Stop thinking that way. In the study, when things are coming up inside, what is the impact to watch all of that as observer? And what is the impact when I'm just still trying to control it?
I think this is where the title of this session really becomes essential, spiritual awareness and perception. It's so much the vibrance and the efficacy, if you will, of what I'm able to do depends a lot on my practice of what we call soul consciousness, how deeply I've gone into this eternal sense of myself, as I am a spiritual being, this is my true nature, this is how deeply I've really gone into that, not just as ideas. I know that we've talked about this many times, but we have different cards with different points of reflection. The one that was selected today was that there is a world of difference between being just going into thoughts, the embodiment of thoughts, versus awareness, a world of difference. And that already, this is a key part of perception, is being able to see clearly the quality of effort I'm making. Is this just sitting at the thought level? Because if it is, I'm going to land up in the latter state you talked about, where I'm sort of fighting to maintain my ground as a neutral observer, but there's emotional chaos going on. I'm just fighting. If I'm just doing...
And you're not really a neutral observer.
Really, if soul consciousness is happening just at the thought level, can I even see the difference? Can I really see what I'm doing? Because it needs to become reality. It needs to become a kinesthetic experience for it to really work in terms of what you're talking about, to really naturally shape how I see and feel.
Do you feel that you can share what the feeling would feel like if I'm just at that level of just thoughts versus the awareness? Would you say that there would be a shift in the deep experience versus just maybe some sort of fluctuation that would happen if I'm still just having certain thoughts and I'm just staying at that level of thoughts and not really going deep enough?
I think what we start to notice is that the old still controls me. The old way of operating is still going to kick in. And the eternal or intrinsic way of operating doesn't really get a chance. There's a lot of what we call battling to try to get the eternal or the intrinsic, the spiritual, to launch, but the old stuff will keep kicking in.
You mean in similar circumstances?
Yeah, I just have
you
the
don't
same
feel
reactions.
change.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, I may not see that's what's going on. When we talk about perception or seeing, the number one place I want to experiment is on the self, watching the self.
It's interesting because there is this phrase, this word called mantra. Mm-hmm. And in different ways we hear of mantra as just to repeat something again and again. And that trap can certainly happen in the study where I'm just saying I'm a soul again and again. I'm not really feeling it. And I suppose that's where it is, like learning to actually go deep into that, and even that seems to be quite a journey.
To be able to see, I would say it is part of that big topic of following directions. Today, I know, being in the studio with a client, and pulling out all the stops in terms of the classic things to do to be able to train a client. You're modeling the behavior, you're throwing every cue, verbal, visual, kinesthetic, everything we're trained to do. Obviously in these times we can't do hands-on. And I was just in awe of how challenging it is for them. You're giving cues, and literally I'm saying, look in the mirror. And that it's just, and I realized there was a couple of things going on, which is the whole following the directions. One was this capacity to see ourselves can be quite compromised, but also our readiness to execute the direction. We may not yet be capable or ready to execute the direction, so that's another topic. But even just to be able to see what I'm doing relative to the direction I've been given, that is fascinating. And so that relates to this practice of soul consciousness. A lot, we can throw in a lot of our own stuff of what we think it's supposed to be like. Even though the directions are quite clear, we can still throw a lot of our other stuff in there, what this is supposed to be like. And I started to notice this particular client, lovely soul, but they've got this little bit of a habit, and I think it's because they've got so much going on in their mind that it takes a lot to have them be fully present. They'll be chat. I'm not a fan of chatting about other stuff while they're training, because they need to be fully, focused on what they're doing. But I know that they can have other things going on in their mind. And I will actually switch, like I'm literally in front of them doing the exercise, and I'll just do a slight shift in what we're doing. And it takes a while before they actually notice there's been a change and begin to execute that change themselves. Like they literally don't see that there has been a change. So it fascinated me in terms of their eyes are open, but there's other things going on internally again. As we started the inside out, so much is interfering, and yet seeing is so critical when it comes to following directions. So when I'm trying to see what is my practice of soul consciousness relative to the directions I've been given, that depends so much on my sight, my perception, looking at the self.
Would you feel that the capacity to see continues to improve as you're in the study?
I think that's the idea. We talk about the third eye of knowledge. I think the idea is that it would become more and more refined, which means I'm able to, self-correct, self-benefit, progress, and with respect to the self, and with respect to others, far more merciful and caring in our vision.
Suddenly this word fear came up in terms of, you were just asking, or encouraging us to ask ourselves, what is my practice of soul consciousness? Because I know you had mentioned in previous sessions, there is likely this fear. It's not me, it's ego. Because ego is going to have to basically leave if I'm going to experience who I really am.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you had shared in the past recognizing that as well when you came into this study. Would that seem very obvious that it's fear, though?
I guess it depends on every soul, how much sort of work they've done on themselves before they enter the study, how well they know themselves. And I think we get a lot of guidance when we came into the study, so we're kind of told point blank this could happen, and whether or not I can hear that and I can accept it and feel that it's relevant to me, that's all sort of in the student's hands. But yeah, I feel that just because so much of being able to see differently will require letting go, and anytime letting go enters the equation, there is the fear of the loss, the fear of letting go. So, but it's interesting, as you were starting the question, I was thinking again about this idea of, sometimes in a class, there might be 3 repetitions. And so the first one, is to sort of figure out what's going on. The second one is, when I get to them and said, look, this is your last opportunity to sort out what you want to do with this exercise, and then there's no more. It's over. So when it comes to fear, part of that is, yes, I need to let go, but sometimes I don't want to see what I'm doing. Because I'm not sure if I'll be able to do anything about it. But the thing is that eventually I'll run out of time. So I always feel it's not scary to look while I still have time to do something about it. It's wonderful. It's nothing to be afraid of, because we've got time to address it. Right? It's like, oh my goodness, all this time, I don't think I've been doing it at all. It's like, thank goodness I noticed that before I ran out of time. So to not be afraid, it's very refreshing to look at the self and be honest.
So one of the reasons why I was asking about that, I had a meeting today, an experiments in silence meeting. And I noticed when we took our moment of silence to begin with, that in a way, I think in subtle ways, I was not allowing myself to go into that experience of silence, or allowing myself to have an experience of my original self. And I think there was a lot of maybe I'm not feeling it. You kind of pull yourself out of it. And I guess that's why I was thinking a lot about fear and how it all disconnects to, then if I don't really have a real experience of myself, how is my perception about anything going to change?
I think and it's something I love about Raj Yoga, is that, it's just completely understood. We even go so far as to call the university, completely understood, this is learning. And when one is learning, then, and that's really clear, then you don't have to be afraid. We want to see what's going on. It's this wonderful, and I've always appreciated that. It's wonderful. It's so lovely to feel safe enough to look at yourself. Obviously this, requires some self-respect to do, but it's wonderful to be in a context, a container where it's very clear, this is about learning, It's all about learning, explaining, understanding. This isn't about judging or feeling bad, but I want to understand what's going on in the side of the self, so I can restore my highest potential. So if I see, this feels numb, it's not meaningful, I don't think I get it, what's going on? It's like, oh, thank goodness I don't have to lie to myself or compare myself to others or any of these other crazy things. That's frightening. I'm in a space where it's like, but I'm here to be able to see these things, and I'm sure that if the more honest we are, the more it seems to attract useful information to us that will help us to move forward in a meaningful way in the context of our own story. So I've really always appreciated that about this study.
I really appreciate just these last remarks you're sharing, because it ties back into the intention of this series, which is about spirituality in day-to-day life, and why, just always linking everything back to awareness, because the intention is when we start to look at spirituality in day-to-day life, I wonder if sometimes we're not trying to be dishonest, but not really being able to see from where am I seeing things to be able to apply. Am I coping, or am I actually going into reality?
It is, and to appreciate there's so much that's trying to distort, as we said in the beginning with the mic, distort. There's ego, there's attachment, that these things we've sort of picked up along the way that are really trying to stay alive and sort of jump in there and distort our efforts, why we're here, which is to see very clearly from this place of self-respect or spiritual awareness.
Well, I also want to share appreciation for the suggestion for this series, because I certainly have learned a lot, and hoping that others who have joined us as well. So I don't know what the next part of the series is next week, so I guess it'll be a surprise for all of us, and so we'll have a little reflection.
It's a very beautiful aspect of solitude, where I experience the sense of spending quality time with the self, giving the self 100% of my attention. Then I come to the self with an attitude to learn, to understand, to benefit. Very pure and healthy relationship or perspective to hold for the self. When I create that type of inner environment, one of learning, understanding, this pure interest to uplift the self, to transform the self. If I have that supportive and empowering inner environment, it's amazing how my sight towards the self improves. Yes, I will definitely begin to see the beauty of the self, the value of the self, and I will also see the ways I sabotage myself, the doubts I might have in the self. I will see it all, and there won't be fear. There'll be this sense of relief to have so much clarity towards the self. Is the first step in moving forward. What are my self-perceptions? How do I see the self? Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you for those who joined with us on YouTube as well as Instagram. And Binny, we are also excited for what the surprise is next week. So I'm going to hand it over to Judy, because we have a couple of new sessions coming up.
Oh dear. Let's see if we can remember. Yes, I believe we might have updated our website, which I always highly recommend you go to, so you actually get the right information as opposed to what might happen here right now. But of course, this session will continue, and we might have another one of these once a month on Saturday, because on Saturdays from 2 to 3, on the Zoom platform, and I believe we'll probably stream to YouTube as well. It used to be Inner Fitness, but we're going to turn into Soul Cafe. So every Saturday in the course of the month, there'll be 4 or 5 different types of sessions offered. Sometimes interview, sometimes it will be looking at inner fitness, fitness of spirit. Sometimes it might be more of a workshop. So there'll be different sessions, sometimes reflective, a different session, if you will, something different on the menu every Saturday, 2 to 3. So look out for that. That will start next Saturday. That will start. I'm looking forward to it. It's a surprise to me too what it will be, but that will start next Saturday. So that should be on our website in terms of the details of joining on Zoom if you wish to interact real time, but also you can view it live streaming to YouTube. The drop-in meditations continue Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays, and as well as we have some drop-ins happening for Hindi speakers on Wednesday and Thursday, I believe. So I would highly recommend. Is there other Raj Yoga course? A Raj Yoga course, which is next weekend, or did you shift it? 26th, the weekend of the 26th, and the following weekend as well, 2 Sundays. So that's a Raj Yoga course in English will be offered, and that will be a hybrid. Yeah, so on-site as well as online. And we also have a special event coming up, Peace Canada, which will be this coming Sunday. So the 3rd Sunday of every month is World Meditation Hour for Brahma Kumari centers worldwide. We offer a special meditation experience that cares for the self as well as for the world. And this Sunday, the 19th September, from 6:30 to 7:30 local time, so across Canada in the local time, your time zone, there will be a bit of a meditative, very powerful meditative space. So it will be Facebook Live and YouTube, live on YouTube, and basically come onto either platform, and there will be yogis in meditation to support your meditation experience through their vision. So very connected to perception today. There will be a little message from our national coordinator, Brother Eric. There'll be a little bit of meditation, a little bit of video. So it'll be mixed during that hour. You'll get lots of support. So please check. That's going to be on various Facebook, etc. Please check for those details online as well, or email us if you have any questions anytime about the programming or anything else. Thank you so much for joining, and I look forward to the next time. Om Shanti.